Hi, everyone. I'm Esther Zuckerman, and I'm so pleased to welcome Director Colm Bairead. Colm Bairead. Star Catherine Clinch. Carrie Crowley. And Andrew Bennett. We're missing a microphone, so do you want to share with... all so much for being here. Colm, I wanted to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about finding this story and why it's based on a short story, Foster, by Claire Keegan, and how did you find the story and why did you want to adapt it?
I first read Foster in the summer of 2018, and I kind of stumbled upon it really because I read an article in the Irish Times, and it was like a list of the 10 best works of literature written by female authors in Ireland this century, and I kind of was just looking through the list to see, what I had read or hadn't read, and I just saw Foster, and I was aware of Foster because it had made a bit of noise when it first appeared in the New Yorker in 2010. And Claire had sort of, gained a reputation as, particularly as a short story writer. Like most of her, in fact, all of her work is kind of on the smaller end of the scale in a way. But for whatever reason, I just decided to go and buy that story that day. So you can buy it in the bookstore like as a standalone publication, but it's really slight. It's like 85 pages. So Claire doesn't even like to call it a novella. She calls it a long short story. So I read it in about, 45 minutes, and by the end of it, I was in tears, and just everything. I just kind of loved everything about it, from just the beautiful emotional restraint of it to the sort of formal aspects of it. Like it's written in the first person, and it's written in the present tense, although it's not entirely clear whether it's the historical present, you know what I mean? That it could almost be like a memoir. You're not entirely sure about that. But it just felt so immersive to me and so compassionate, and myself and my wife, who's actually the producer of the film, we had become parents, I guess, a year before that, or a year and a half maybe before that. So I kind of had both of us actually when we read it, because I gave it to her straight away after I read it, and we both had a very sort of for me, it was like a paternal response almost to this, because when you've become a parent for the first time, you're keenly aware of what it is that a child needs in terms of affection and attention and care and love and all of those things, and to encounter a child that's not receiving those things, even though it's a fictional child, I just had this sort of response to her in a way, and I think also, only that you're asking me questions right now. I'm kind of quiet, so I kind of related to the character. Like I was similar, I think, when I was younger to that quiet child that's at the center of the story.
Well, Catherine, I wanted to ask you about your sort of initial reactions to Kat and how you identified with her and why sort of she spoke to you.
When I first got part of the script to film the audition tape, I hadn't read the book, but I did afterwards, and I already, even just from reading like a couple of pages, I already thought, kind of felt like I had this connection with Coach, and it really helped me like do the audition because I felt connected to her, and just the way that she's quiet. I suppose I'm pretty quiet myself, and I just really felt for her, and that made it a lot easier to play the part.
That's wonderful. Colm, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about translating. The story is written in English, but translating it into Irish, and the decision to have the film in Irish.
Well, there are kind of a number of reasons for that. I mean, one is quite practical and sort of maybe boring. which was that there was this new fund was established in Ireland for Irish language films. So, but I'm not a fraud. I am an Irish speaker, and I do love the Irish language. Like I was raised, like I've born and raised in Dublin City, which is obviously an English-speaking city, like most places in Ireland. But I had a bilingual upbringing. So my dad's never spoken English to me. My dad's only ever spoken Irish to me. And my dad set up a primary school in our community, which was a language immersion school. It's what we would call a Gael school, which is an Irish language school. So I went to school there. But then I did have all these weird hang-ups though about the language growing up. Like I was sort of I was quite self-conscious about the fact that we were seen as this sort of slightly different family in our community, in this Dublin suburb where, we'd be down the supermarket and my dad would be like shouting at us down the aisles in Irish, and people would be kind of looking at us kind of going, why are they speaking that language? And is he in the IRA? Which my dad is like totally not political, he's just a linguist, he loves languages, he was a German teacher all of his life and speaks Latin and has gone back to university to study ancient Greek, and so he loved the Irish language, and he believed in the idea of preserving it and passing it on to the next generation. But then sort of tragically, when I think about it now, it sort of it hurts a little to think about it, but like for much of my adolescence I would have spoken English back to him. But anyway, so much of my work has been in the Irish language. All of my short films, this is my first feature film, but all of my short films have been in the Irish language, and I've made a lot of documentaries for the Irish language broadcaster, TG Carr, who are one of the funders of this film. And when I read Foster, at that point I was aware of this scheme, and I was looking for material to possibly adapt as an Irish language film. And Foster is an English language story, obviously, but I could see very early on that there was a way of sort of transplanting the story into an Irish language setting in a way that would be believable and authentic for an Irish audience, because I just have a thing about I could never make a film like set in Dublin where everyone's speaking Irish for no reason. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, it has to make sense in terms of the sort of linguistic reality back in Ireland. But then it always felt kind of appropriate to me to translate Foster into Irish, because for me it's a really truthful kind of rendering of us as a people in terms of our emotional and psychological makeup. It just feels like a very true portrait of Irishness. And even when I read Foster, and if I reading the dialogue in it, it's our version of English, which actually has its own title, which is Hiberno English. And Hiberno English is literally a description of a form of English that's haunted by the fact that we used to speak this other language, the Irish language. So for instance, there's a line in the film that's a good example, where Andrew's character, when you say to Caut's dad, the scene earlier on when he first brings Caut to the house and he says, I better hit the road. And you say, what hurry is on you? Yeah. So if you were to say that in Irish, it's Cain Defer Tá Urt. And the syntax of that is precisely the same as it is in English. So that's an example of how the way we speak English is sort of informed by this other language. So Irish people, unfortunately, most Irish people can't really speak Irish, and it's a minority language. It's on UNESCO's endangered languages list. And yet, unbeknownst to ourselves, we're still, in a strange way, kind of speaking it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sort of brings me to a question for you, but also I was wondering if all of you could weigh in just sort of about building this essentially family that develops over the course of the movie in terms of casting Andrew and Carrie and Catherine. Sort of what was the process of sort of putting them together, and for you, what was the process of sort of developing these relationships on screen?
I think the guys are probably better answering this, but yeah, I mean, it was kind of something that we allowed happen sort of in tandem, because we tried to shoot the film as chronologically as possible for everyone's benefit. But we did try and allow, like, Catherine and Carrie and Andrew wouldn't have spent a huge amount of time together prior to the filming, in terms of there wasn't a huge amount of rehearsal time and so forth. But that actually felt okay to us, because we were trying to sort of almost replicate that, you know, like they're strangers in the beginning, and that they get to know one another over time, and it was actually kind of beautiful to watch that happen in real time, like as we were filming. We filmed for 25 days, I think it was, altogether. But yeah, you, Andrew, I know you. What was your thing about you were kind of, you didn't want to, in the beginning, you didn't want to sort of.
Yeah. Well, I knew Carrie sort of. We'd never worked with each other before, but I never had met Catherine, and so I, as the adult apparently in the relationship, I wondered whether I should, you know, make myself delightful and, you know, come on with a charm offensive, but she's far too dignified for that, and so I realised that there's absolutely no point doing that, and just to allow the thing to happen. And luckily, because Colm filmed in proper order, at the beginning where they're supposed to be shy of each other, we were shy of each other, and then over the 5 weeks or whatever it was, we slowly got to be more comfortable with each other, so that by the end we were buddies.
Carrie, what was the experience like for you, sort of especially since your role has this immediate sort of mothering that you take on?
Yeah, like Andrew says, it wasn't difficult. And I remember literally the first day that we came together for a chemistry read, if we're going to call it that. And it was during COVID. So our seats were literally marked with our names. You only sat in the seat that had Carrie on it. It was like, okay, that's where I am. And Catherine was over there and Andrew was over there. So we were like separated from each other. But literally my instinct when she walked into the room was, and it was the lines that Eileen says in the beginning, well, but it was like, look at this girl. Without even realising I was already in the script. It was just so weird. It was just a reaction to seeing her and knowing that she absolutely was this child that was going to be part of our lives if we were lucky enough on the day for Colm to say, yeah, we'll give it to you. But it was lovely. And the fact, and we've all said this as well, because of COVID, we didn't have that whole buddy thing that you would normally have on a set. We didn't all travel together, where you're kind of getting people's news from yesterday and you're getting to know them in other ways. We only knew each other on set. And really, we only knew each other in the scenes. And even when it came to having meals, again, one of those things that you'd all be hanging out and sharing kind of gossip and scandal and stuff. But it was like there were pods. So you had the green or you had the orange or the yellow, and you only sat with your family, you know. So that made it even stronger as a unit as well. It was kind of us and the rest of the world to a certain extent. And there was something beautiful about that. So it allowed us to develop the relationship in a very kind of organic way. It was beautiful. It was lovely. Yeah.
Catherine, this is your first film role. What was that experience like for you? Sort of stepping into camera, and I mean, you're in the whole movie, start to finish.
Yeah, it was very new, and at the start I was very, very nervous, definitely. But I think I was so lucky to be with such an amazing cast and crew that it really just, after a couple of days, I was relaxed and it became a lot easier. And yeah, it's been so exciting and I've learned a lot, and I'm really grateful that I've got to experience it.
I was wondering, for all of the actors, because of how endangered the Irish language is, what does it mean to you sort of to have the film in the language, and for it to be, you know, it is Oscar nominated, and for it to be sort of recognized on this global scale?
Irish lifts my heart. And my Irish isn't perfect. I would have reasonable Irish, but I love it. And when I was around the age that Catherine was in the film, I went to the Gaeltacht for the first time. And it was really interesting. I felt as a child as if I had just been plugged into the right socket. Something about that experience was absolutely innate. It just rang true with every part of my being. So for me to work in Irish is a total joy. And when it's something as beautiful as this in Irish, it's like double joy.
Yeah, and I think it's not just us. I think the whole country. I was here in New York doing a play a few weeks ago, and on my way back on an Aer Lingus flight, the Irish national airline, the hostess said, "Oh God, I saw the film last night. It's great. We're all behind you, la la la." And as I was walking down through first class, she tapped me on the elbow and she said, "Mr. Bennett, I think this is your seat." And I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm sure." And then when I was getting off, when we landed in Dublin and I was getting off, they were lovely. Like, and she said, "When you're making your speech at the Oscars, don't mention us because we'll get into terrible trouble." So the whole country is very moved by it, I think. My dentist gave me free treatment. Really. That's true.
Well, we have to wrap up, but this was so great. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you all so much for being here.